Hi, welcome back to the channel and my review for the Nightmare on Elm Street remake from 2010. So this is the final review in my Elm Street series that I've been doing over the past few months now. Most people would talk about this as being one of the worst films in the franchise, and I'd have to disagree with that. I think there are a number of the sequels that are definitely worse than this remake. But let's get into the bad first. I'll talk about the things that a lot of people criticise with this movie that I actually do agree with, makes it a much lesser version of the original. Of course, the fact that the initial setup and a lot of the scenes are in fact just complete copies and rip-offs of that original movie, but done with some weightless, dodgy CGI. That is a major problem in this film. As I've said all the way through this franchise, I love my practical effects work, the physical effects that I think have aged so well. They look so much better. I love when horror films used to utilise that, and to see a lot of these scenes that were iconic back when they were made in the 80s to be recreated without the atmosphere and some really weak looking CGI, that is a damn shame. And I totally get why some people in the opening of the movie, in those first few scenes where you'd see some of that stuff and think, oh, what the hell is this? I totally get that. And of course the movie does lack the originality. The fact that it didn't decide to go bold and really do something new, just kind of take that core concept and do something brand new. I think people might have respected that. But here they basically decide to recreate the first film, but then also change up some things and go in some different directions that people didn't like, and that made the original film worse, which I'm kind of in two minds about what I agree with there, but I kind of do get on a lot of levels why people don't enjoy this movie. And I think the other thing as well is there was something fun about the original Elm Street film, even though it was primarily a horror. It did have that slight tongue-in-cheek edge where Freddy has, you know, some of the lines and the personality that make him charismatic in a very dark way. And I think something about the tone of that film was very interesting, whereas here it's a lot more bland because it's just out and out horror. This is just a dark, twisted, bleak film and feels reminiscent of a lot of horror films that we saw all the way throughout the 2000s as well. And as well, it's not, and even the fact that it does go darker and isn't that scary either, that makes it also a bit of a letdown. So on all those fronts, I definitely do understand where people are coming from. So as for the story directions, where they did decide to go a different route and go a lot darker, I can understand why people can't accept that change and can't get on board with it because of how grim and nasty it is. But I think once you can actually accept it, there is things about it that are quite well done here. Like, I do like the bit of depth that is added where these kids, as they're starting to have these nightmares, they realise something is wrong and they realise that they're somewhat connected from their past. And it kind of talks about this theme of having childhood traumas, that you're kind of are like these repressed memories that have been hidden away, and it's kind of the story of these characters that don't know each other that well at school, but they're kind of brought together by re-experiencing these past horrors and traumas that they've all been through, and this is what leads to these current nightmares and the whole history surrounding Freddy Krueger. And I'd actually forgotten how detailed it was, like the way they kind of really delve into that storyline. It is pretty grim when you see what Freddy has been doing. It's pretty nasty, but I do actually think it is quite an interesting route to take if you are going to tackle it here, and I don't feel like it was done in a cheap and lazy way. I do think it's clear to me here that the director made a real effort of taking this storyline seriously and doing the best job with it he could. I don't think it's executed perfectly, and I do think there are problems with it, but to some extent I can kind of accept it as being a different movie, and the fact it decided to go this route, and I found it quite interesting to follow along with. So this is one of the big criticisms as well of the film, is the performance from Rooney Mara. And of course, because she is an actress that is so highly regarded now, you know, I'm pretty sure she's won an Oscar before, like she's a very top tier actress. And here she kind of gives a more slow, diluted and blander performance. And I know in some interviews she didn't talk that fondly about the movie. I don't know whether now she kind of regrets doing it or what, because it didn't do particularly well, or wasn't well received at least. But to me, I think the performance does feel intentional, like this kind of character who's playing an outcast, like an actual outcast who is slightly depressed, has these kind of past traumas, is really battling with sleep deprivation, is really troubled by some of the stuff that she's seen in her life and her dreams. And she kind of just seems like she's walking around like in the background, things are just happening and she's just kind of existing and she's numb and she doesn't have the emotions that other normal kids her age would have. I kind of buy into that. I think when you watch it now and kind of go in open-minded, I think she does a really nice job with the performance, and it may be that she wasn't putting that much effort in here, and she's just because she is naturally obviously just a very talented actress. Maybe that carries through to some extent and she still manages to pull it off, I'm not sure. But it feels convincing to me. I don't really get the criticism. I think people have connected the fact that she didn't like the movie to this being a bad performance. And I don't really think that's fair. I think when you watch it not knowing about that, it does still seem like quite a genuine performance. And I feel like the character... again, the character just feels genuine to me and telling the story, and you really do feel it at some points when, especially when her and Quentin start to have this connection together and they're really struggling with the sleep, doing anything to stay awake, and they're connecting with each other just to kind of make themselves feel alive and kind of get through this whole nightmare. I kind of like some of that stuff, and I think they do a really nice job with it. And the other thing, of course, is Freddy Krueger. I think they were in a lose-lose situation, really, replacing Freddy. People even now still want Robert Englund to come back. Like, the guy must be in his late 70s now, and people are still wanting him back rather than see a fresh new take on the role. So I think it was destined to fail, even though I do think Jackie Earle Haley is a really good actor and does bring something interesting to this performance as well. The problem is you just can't help but compare. Robert Englund was so iconic as Freddy, just his whole look, his demeanour, his voice, the way he delivered certain lines, and just that kind of... He just brought these subtle actions that are very distinctive to Freddy, which is why the character became so iconic. And you can't help but compare. And I do think that, this version of Freddy does not feel as distinctive. It just feels like a slightly blander, lamer version. And they of course decided to go full horror here as well, rather than having the humour. I think the problem is if they tried to copy Robert Englund, it would have gone down even worse. So the fact they decided to go the more serious route, keep him in the shadows, less dialogue, and just kind of keep in tone with the rest of the story, I think it was the best idea, to be honest. And you definitely could have done way worse than having Jackie Earle Haley. I would have been more than happy to see him come back again and play Freddy once more. And while some of the scenes are just lame copies and rip-off of that original, there are a couple of creative scenes in here as well, I think. I think especially the scene where Nancy comes out of the bathroom, rather in the original where she gets woken up and her mum comes in. In this, she walks outside out of her bedroom and it's snowing around her and she's outside and she's kind of seeing the house again. Like, that transition is really nicely done and just brought a slightly, a slight change of direction to the original with some creative visuals as well, which I quite liked. And also, where logically I don't think it entirely works, but the scene with Quentin waking up, or sorry, rather he falls asleep in the pool and then he wakes up and he comes out and he sees Freddy being chased down and you see the whole event of him being burned down by the parents and stuff. There's stuff like that is really cool to watch, even just for the scenes in themselves, even if you don't like the context of which they were set in. I do think it works quite well. I do understand to some extent some people's problem with it being more distasteful. The fact that in the original, the story was that Freddy Krueger was a child killer and was a child predator as well. But for some reason, the fact they decided not to kind of delve into that in the original, people are happy to forget that it was there, whereas here they decide to kind of focus on that portion as well, and people thought that was kind of too nasty to follow along. I don't know, it's kind of a weird logic to me, I guess, this idea that we're fine with a child killer but not a child predator to watch as a horror villain. I don't know, it's kind of something kind of weird about that. I do get to some extent where people are coming from, and as I said, if you're not prepared for that part of the story, you might just find it too gross to get into it. But as I say, for me personally, kind of watching it again, expecting it, knowing what's coming from this story, I think they did quite a nice job with this film. And yeah, don't entirely get the hate for this one. I definitely don't think it's a great movie. It's still lacking in a number of areas, but when you look at like the IMDb, the Letterboxd ratings and stuff, this movie is so poorly reviewed and it's just nowhere near that bad. So sorry, I might have lost some of you with this one, because I know a lot of people really do hate this film, but I actually think it's not too bad. Definitely worth a watch watch if you haven't seen it before, and go in with an open mind and see what you think. But I'm going to give this one a 3.5 out of 5. So guys, thank you so much for watching this review, and thanks to all of you that have been following along with this review series. I've had so much fun making these, and I am also going to be finishing it all off and capping it off with a ranking video soon as well, going through all the movies from the worst to the best, so stay tuned for that. But as always, please do feel free to leave all your thoughts and comments down in the section below. Do appreciate that. And yeah, do take care. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.